My mother is 82 years old. She has multiple illnesses. She is very weak. She has served her community for over 50 years. She was a teacher in a Kannada school and she retired as a principal. She has taught generations of students, thousands and thousands of students. She has served her community endlessly. She wants to see her daughter because she is very weak and she is old. So there's no mystery. I mean, the Modi administration publicly opposed the resolution I brought forward condemning the CAA and RC citizenship laws. They publicly opposed the ban on caste discrimination that we won. So it's no surprise that they are engaging in political retaliation against me.
Why do you tarnish the image of India in foreign soil?
What tarnishes the image of India is the caste system itself, not talking about it. So if we want a good image for India, then we should all be fighting against the caste system. We cannot shove it under the rug. I do not regret for one moment for having fought for working people. In fact, I am deeply proud and honored that I was able to help lead these movements where we have won historic victories that have no parallel.
அரன்சை நண்பர்களுக்கு வணக்கம். அரன்சை ஊடகம் சுயேட்சையாக இயங்குவதற்காகவே உருவாக்கப்பட்டது. நாம் செய்கிற வேலை உண்மையிலேயே மக்களுக்காக செய்கிறோம் என்பதை நீங்கள் நம்பினால், வாய்ப்பு இருந்தால் இந்த ரேசர் பே QR கோடுக்குள்ளே நீங்கள் அதை ஸ்கேன் பண்ணி எங்களுக்கு உங்களால் இயன்றதை விருப்பம் இருந்தால் ஆதரவு தெரிவிக்கலாம்.
வணக்கம், இது அரன்சை. நான் தேவா பாஸ்கர். கடந்த சில ஆண்டுகளுக்கு முன்னாடி 2 முக்கியமான இஷ்யூ நம்ம பேசியிருப்போம். குறிப்பாக அமெரிக்காவில் எந்த மாதிரி சாதி வேலை செய்யுது அப்படின்றது தொடர்பான 2 இன்டர்வியூ அண்ட் அங்கே நடக்கிற ஆன்டி காஸ்ட் மூவ்மெண்ட் தொடர்பாக செயல்பட்ட 2 செயற்பாட்டாளர்களை நம்ம பேசியிருப்போம். ஒன்று சியாட்டில் சாதி ஒரு டிஸ்கிரிமினேட்டரி ப்ராக்டிஸ், அதுக்கு எதிராக ஒரு சட்டம் கொண்டு வரதுக்கான போராட்டம், அதில் முதல் முறையாக சியாட்டில் அது நடைபெற்றது. அதற்கப்புறம் கலிஃபோர்னியாவில் அதே மாதிரியான ஒரு பில்லை கொண்டு வந்திருந்தாங்க. இந்த 2 சம்பவத்திற்கும் பின்னாடி இருக்கிற ஒரு முக்கியமான லீடர் தான் இப்போ மீட் பண்ண இருக்கோம். இவங்க தொடர்பாக நிறைய செய்திகள் நம்ம நாட்டில் இருக்கிறத பார்க்க முடியுது. குறிப்பாக அவங்களுடைய அம்மா உடல்நிலை சரியில்லாமல் இருக்காங்க. இந்த சூழல்லையும் அவங்களுக்கான விசா மறுக்கப்படுது அப்படின்றது தான் இந்த குற்றச்சாட்டு எழுந்திருக்கு இந்திய அரசின் மீது. அந்த ஆன்டி காஸ்ட் லீடர் தான் நம்ம இன்னைக்கு மீட் பண்ண இருக்கிறோம். ஸோ மேம் வணக்கம்.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes ma'am. So to begin with, people usually travel abroad and go to America to live the American dream, the so-called American dream. People will be more interested in living the luxurious life and they will be more in making money and making their life better. So what triggered you to join the anti-caste movement or to stand against discrimination in America? What was the core reason or what triggered you to be a politician or to start your career as an activist, ma'am?
My political thinking really was shaped from my childhood in India. I was born in Pune. I was brought up in Mumbai. My grandparents and my other family members lived in Bengaluru. So these cities were where I spent my life. And my earliest memory actually was the question of why there is an ocean of poverty around me when there were a few wealthy people. And also it was a scientific question. It was both moral outrage but also a scientific question about why should there be poverty at all? Why should there be any suffering at all when it is obvious that human society is capable of tremendous technological advancements which should be able to eliminate all these sources of suffering altogether. And it was that quest to answer that question, the journey to answer that question led me to Marxism, which I would define as a scientific study of the capitalist system, which is the system all around us, whether you're in the US or in India. This is the capitalist system globally, and understanding why capitalism is at the root of all this suffering really helped me understand what my role should be in helping to eliminate this. And my anger against the caste system, against caste oppression, is part and parcel of my quest for a better human society, a society where people can actually flourish as opposed to what we have now, where billions of people are exploited and a few billionaires gain at the expense of the rest of us. And at the same time, in order to divide and conquer all of us. The system also has various types of oppression like caste oppression, sexual oppression, and so on and so forth. In the United States, there is racism against black and brown people as well. And so it was all of that together that led me to become a Marxist. And my the fight we engaged in here to the historic ban against caste discrimination was part and parcel of our fight as socialists.
How is it being a Marxist in United States? Like they have a very strong outrage against Marxism or communism, to say. So how is it being a Marxist in America?
That's a very good question, especially for the people who are watching this who are in India, because it's true that in the previous generations, during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, there was a very systematic demonizing of socialist ideas. And really, it was demonizing of the Soviet Union itself, but that came along with demonizing of socialist ideas overall. But today's America is a very different situation than it was maybe 50 years ago. I mean, obviously, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. The wall has fallen globally, including in Russia and in the former Soviet Union states. We have capitalism. And so, what you're seeing is an entire generation of young people in the United States, and really, I would say tens of millions of people. So, people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who have seen their standards of living decline dramatically at the same time that the billionaires have become richer. In fact, even since the pandemic, the billionaires are richer. And we're talking about a very small group of individuals. Of course, in the United States, it's Jeff Bezos who owns Amazon, Bill Gates who owns Microsoft, and of course, all the top CEOs, some of them are of Indian origin, Sundar Pichai of Alphabet, and you have Satya Nadella in Microsoft. But these are, the few billionaires and multimillionaires gain at the expense of the rest of us. So in reality, what you see in the United States is deep anger at the capitalist system and a real desire to fight back. And what's missing is the leadership of that fight back. And so what we did in Seattle, I was a city council member in Seattle for 10 years from 2014 to the end of 2023. And we showed a tragically rare example, but we showed a real example of what it looks like to have a genuine Marxist elected, working class elected representative. And so I took home only the average worker's wage while I was elected, and we won the $15 minimum wage, the first major city $15 minimum wage. So that is $15 an hour for all workers at the very least. So that's a minimum wage. And in fact, that minimum wage, Deva, is today it is $20.76 an hour in Seattle. That is by far the highest minimum wage. Just to give a point of comparison for your viewers, the federal minimum wage is $7.25. That is poverty. That is beyond poverty. I mean, you cannot live on $7.25. But those are the kinds of victories we won as socialists, and it was never a barrier to say that I was a socialist. In other words, working people didn't get angry at me for saying I'm a socialist. In fact, the response was opposite. Wow, I've never met an elected representative who actually fights for working people, who uses their position to build movements, and you won $15 an hour. We also won the Amazon tax, a tax on big corporations like Amazon to fund affordable housing. So often, working people and young people will tell me, I like everything you stand for. So if you're a socialist, maybe I'm a socialist too.
Will they stand with you if you call yourself a Marxist? Do they have aversion against Marxist? Because whatever we see in television series and whatever that we are seeing, people are like Americans are shown us, they are always against Marxism, they are always against Marxists. Don't call yourself a Marxist, you'll be a dictator or you're a fascist. So this is what shown on televisions and whatever actors we have to America. Like Americans are against Marxism or Marxists. This is a perception. So is that true, or they stand with you?
No, I mean, it's first of all, we have to let me clarify that, we in the Soviet Union, what we saw was, in 1917, a genuine workers' revolution. The Russian Revolution was the most progressive event in human history. And there was a genuine workers' revolution, meaning working people as a whole taking control of the economy. So, in that sense, it was the most democratic event to ever happen. But after that, because it remained socialism in one country, it ended up getting attacked by capitalist nations in Europe and, of course, the United States, the richest capitalist country. And so, because of that isolation, it ended up becoming what I would call a deformed workers' government. In other words, it became a bureaucratic state where there was a bureaucracy that gained at the expense of the masses in the Soviet Union. And so I don't support that kind of bureaucracy, but what I stand for is what the original Russian Revolution stood for, which is actually workers democratically running the economy of the world in favor of the planet and in favor of the billions of people. And that idea is of strong appeal to people across nations. But who doesn't like those ideas, Deva? It is the billionaire class. So in the United States, it is, and as in India, how people perceive socialist ideas depends on their class loyalties. If you're talking to working class people who are fed up with the status quo and want to win a better society where they can have decent lives, their families can live good lives, their children can have decent lives, then they have strong agreement with the things that we are fighting for, which is now we are fighting for a $25 an hour minimum wage, Medicare for all, single pay, free healthcare for all, taxing big business to fund education, and so on. And then ultimately, we need to take the top corporations into democratic public ownership of workers. And so these ideas appeal to working class people. They will appeal to working class people in India just as they will appeal to working class people in the US. But the billionaire class, both in India and the US, is going to be viciously opposed to it. So whether it is Jeff Bezos, an American billionaire, or Gautam Adani or Mukesh Ambani, an Indian billionaire, their class interests are aligned with one another. So even if their skin color is different, even if their race is different, their class interests ultimately are joined at the hip. Whereas working class people, working people in the US might look different than working people in India, but our interests are aligned together. And that's why, as a Marxist, I also believe that we need international movements, because it has to be an international working class movement, not a movement that is artificially divided on the basis of nationality or caste or race.
To fight casteism or to fight capitalism, it could have been in India and it could have done the same. Why move to America and doing this activism? Was it accidental or planned?
It was totally accidental. I mean, as I said, all my life, all throughout
You
my
just went
childhood.
to America to live, to have the American dream.
No,
You
no, no, no. It wasn't like that at all. I mean, I was all, as I said, all throughout my childhood and teenage years, it's fair to say I was absolutely obsessed with the question of poverty and trying to understand what first of all, to develop an analysis of why it exists in the first place and what is the strategy to beat it. For me, it was not merely about intellectual interest. It's not about making myself feel great because I understand some intellectual ideas. For me, it was always about changing society. It's like Karl Marx himself said, philosophers have interpreted the world. The point is to change it. That's what I was always interested in. For me, the reason coming to America is completely personal. My former partner happened to move to the US and I moved with him. So that was an entirely personal reason. However, I'll tell you something interesting. Actually, coming to America was highly educational for me, because I understood that even in the richest country in the world, as long as the system is capitalism, there will still be poverty. There will still be inequality. People will still suffer from lack of basic services related to education, housing, healthcare, and public infrastructure. So, obviously, the poverty rates and the nature of poverty in the US is different than in a neo-colonial and poorer country like India or Bangladesh and so on. But the point is that in every country in the world, on the basis of capitalism, poverty is never going to be ended. And leave that aside for a second, talk about the climate crisis. The climate catastrophe is at our doorstep. The planet is on fire, and capitalism has proved itself completely incapable of even beginning to address it. And that's why actually the clock is ticking for us to change society, and that's why there's an urgency of building mass movements, and in reality what we need are revolutionary movements internationally across national borders in order to overthrow capitalism and usher in a different kind of society, which in my view is a socialist society. Meaning, it's not an abstract notion, it means something concrete. It means, rather than a few billionaires and multimillionaires owning the vast resources of the planet, working people, billions, 7 billion working people should own it together. And then together we can make rational decisions for our society. I can give you a quick, concrete example. At this moment, the barrier to addressing the climate catastrophe is not that, oh, the majority of people don't understand it, you have to educate them. No, that might have been true 30 years ago. Now it is absolutely not true. Absolutely, the majority of ordinary people in the world understand what a massive crisis the planet is in. However, who controls the fossil fuel resources? Who controls the big banks that underwrite the destructive fossil fuel projects? Who owns the oil fields, the natural gas companies, and all of these vast areas of land that are part of the oil and natural gas industry and the carbon emissions industry? It is the billionaires. It is Wall Street. It is the wealthiest people in our society. So, in other words, it's a very simple idea. You can't control what you don't own. So if billions of people don't control these resources, then they are not going to be able to stop the climate crisis. And the only way that the climate crisis, for example, can be stopped is if ordinary people as a whole own those resources. Then we can we can stop the consumption of fossil fuel, and then we can go towards renewable energy. So in other words, the barriers are not, do we have the knowledge or do we have the scientific expertise? No, the barrier is capitalism.
Yes, ma'am. There are many issues, like there are race issues, as you said earlier. There is racism, climate issues, and gender issues, and so much issues in the society. Why take caste and fight against casteism, and why take workers' movement and fight against it? Why these two was your go-to, or why did you pick these two issues in forefront?
Well, I think the workers movement has to be in the forefront no matter what. Like, even if you are fighting on the issues of caste oppression or sexual violence or any other kind of oppression, even there the workers movement has to be at the forefront. Because ultimately, the reason these specific oppressions exist, meaning oppressions that affect specific sections of society, like, for example, women's oppression affects women. you know Caste oppression affects oppressed caste people, it doesn't affect other people. Black Anti-black racism in the US affects black people, it doesn't affect white people. The reason these specific types of oppressions persist under a deeply unequal society like capitalism is that, for a system like capitalism, where a few people at the top own the vast majority of the wealth in society, and the rest of us labor and get a fraction of our labor in return as our paycheck and our wages, for such a system to survive, it is necessary for the ruling class to divide the rest of us into categories so that we are fighting amongst each other. That's why there is no end to oppression on the basis of capitalism. We will need to end capitalism if we want to end caste oppression. We will need to end capitalism if we want to end sexual violence. However, uh, in order to, the way Marxists approach fighting for change is that we are not shy about explaining our full analysis of what needs to change in the world. But we're not armchair activists. We don't just say, oh, this is what needs to happen in the future, but now I'm not going to do anything. No, in the here and now, we do need to fight for reforms under capitalism. But in the process of fighting for those reforms, we try to explain to people why we need class struggle against the capitalist class, and what is the strategy for winning them, why we cannot win something without a fight. We cannot win by having illusions in the billionaires or their political representatives, which in the United States it's Democrats and Republicans. So we try to explain these lessons as part of the fight back. but the actual fight back is crucial. We can't just say, oh, we need socialism in the future and we'll wait till then. No, that's not how it happens. We have to carry out struggle now. Part of the strategy for being successful at winning victories, like we have a huge track record of winning victories. One of the reasons we've been successful is that we understand how to take momentum and then make it even bigger. So, in other words, there was momentum for fighting against caste oppression here, because so this was in early January 2023 when we started fighting for this, and we won it in February. But that momentum for it came from 3 years prior to that, which is in January 2020, when we won a resolution condemning Modi and the BJP's CA, NRC, anti-Muslim, anti-poor citizenship laws. So we won that in a big fight, because the Democrats were opposed to us, the Modi government was opposed to us, and the Modi government's supporters in the US, in the form of the Hindu American Foundation and the Coalition of Hindus for North America, these are very Hindutva-vadi organizations. They are very, very reactionary right-wing organizations. They were all opposed to us. We won despite their opposition. It was a hard fight, but it was in that fight that Indian American activists learned a lot and they were fired up. They wanted to fight for more. That's why we had momentum 3 years later to fight against caste oppression and to bring this legislation to ban caste discrimination in Seattle. So, in other words, one of the lessons of our successes is that we have to grab momentum wherever and whenever we find it, because like you correctly said, there is so much wrong in society. We could pick any of these issues. You have to pick an issue which has a momentum behind it, where people are willing to fight for it, win those victories, and then go ahead. I'll just say, in your introduction, Deva, you mentioned the bill in California that came after we won. That bill lost. Why did that lose? Because they did not have the strategy we did. They had illusions. The leaders of that movement had illusions in the Democratic Party. We warned them from day one, if you put your faith in the Democrats, they are going to betray you. And that's exactly what happened.
Now let's come to the issue that you have raised now. Why do you think your visa has denied? You have made so much allegations against the Indian government. So why do you think your visa is getting denied?
I think it is no mystery. First of all, yesterday when my husband and I were at the consulate, Indian consulate, they told me directly to my face that I am on the reject list. That's a quote. They said I'm on the reject list. So, in other words, first of all, it's very clear that the Modi government has a reject list. In other words, they're blacklisting people who are criticizing the government, who are criticizing Modi and the BJP. And it's not, I am certainly not the first example of this. We know the Swedish professor, Indian professor in Sweden, Ashok Swain, whose OCI status was revoked, overseas citizen of India status was revoked twice because he has criticized the Modi administration. We know professors like Nitisha Kaul, writers like Atish Tasir. In fact, the Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have documented that at least 100, if not more, people have experienced this, where their visa was revoked or their OCI was revoked or their visa was denied, as in my case. So there's no mystery. I mean, the Modi administration publicly opposed the resolution I brought forward condemning the CAA and RC citizenship laws. They publicly opposed the ban on caste discrimination that we won. So it's no surprise that they are engaging in political retaliation against me.
It's a technical issue. Like when we talk to the right wingers, like they will say there is some issues in they'll quote the technical issues there. Like this is not a political retaliation. We don't have anything with that. It is with the consulate to decide.
Well, they're wrong, because the consul, first of all, my visa has been denied 3 times now. And there's no reason. I was born and brought up in India. I am a public representative with full accountability to working people. Like, I'm not some person who hides in secret. Everybody knows what I have fought for. Everybody knows that I'm accountable to the working class. And also, yesterday the consulate themselves, the officers at the consulate themselves told me I am on the reject list. So whoever is saying that that's not the reason, well, they are either misinformed or they are deliberately lying.
Do you have any allegations against the people opposing you in America, like Hindu-American Foundation or Coalition of Hindus. Do you think they have any association with this rejection of your visa?
I mean, I don't know what I don't know. I'm not part of those organizations. They are right wing organizations, so I can't tell you facts about what's going on. But what I can tell you is I know that they are Modi supporting organizations. They are they share the Hindutva ideology and the very pro right wing ideology. And it's not, see, let's also be clear that this is not just about India. You are seeing those things happen in the United States as well. You're seeing that those things happen in other countries where, because of the betrayals of many of the liberal bourgeois parties like Congress and others in India, like the Democratic Party in the US, because of all of that, uh, and because of the absence of real left wing leadership, real working class leadership, you are seeing right wing ideas gain ground. And it's in that context that Modi and the BJP have come to power. But in reality, if you had a party in India, which you don't right now, I'm just hypothetically speaking, but if we had a party that could do what we did in Seattle, which is unite working people across caste and gender and other differences on a program of demands of living wages, of full union rights, of full healthcare and public services, taxing big business and the wealthy to fund social needs. If you had a party like that, that party could defeat Narendra Modi today. It could happen. But it hasn't happened because there is not a single opposition party worth any of this.
No, we had India Alliance here, all the parties united against.
Yeah, but unfortunately they still, I mean, they did one thing that did happen, and it's not so much about the parties themselves, it's about ordinary people. Ordinary people are showing that Modi and the BJP are not invincible. I mean, clearly, they were claiming that they were predicting that they would sweep the elections. They didn't sweep it, but they still won it, which means two things. One is that they are not invincible, you can beat them, but also that's not enough to beat them. It's not enough just to say we are not Modi to beat them. Just like in the US, it is not enough for the Democrats to say we're not Trump. They lost. The reason the Democrats lost, Deva, is because they betrayed working people year after year. Biden the Biden Harris administration, they betrayed working people on the promise of $15 an hour. They betrayed working people on the promise of canceling student debt, of bringing forward public healthcare option, because healthcare is a major issue in the US. They betrayed working people on all those promises. Not to mention, they also funded an ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is the fastest moving genocide in the 21st century. The majority of people in the US are angry about the genocide. So the Democrats have deeply, deeply failed working people. And that's what has created a vacuum that the right wing and that Trump himself has occupied. But that doesn't mean that people are just wanting to go to the right. It doesn't mean that the BJP can last forever, but they can last as long as there is no actual working class alternative. And that is why we are fighting in the US through my organization, Workers Strike Back, to build a movement to win a $25 an hour minimum wage, fighting Trump on his, against his attacks on immigrants, fighting against the genocide in Gaza, fighting to end US military funding for the Israeli state. So we are fighting on all these fronts, but we need that on a much bigger level. We are a small organization. We need a much bigger organization. But unfortunately, what has happened is that the labor leadership has cheerleaded the Democratic Party, and they've not actually succeeded in doing this. And in fact, now the same leaders who cheerleaded Kamala Harris, are now saying, "Oh, I'm happy to work with Trump." You cannot achieve anything with leaders like this. So there is a leadership vacuum. But as far as ordinary people in India and the US are concerned, I think there is a deep hunger to fight for something better.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question now, like regarding your denial of visa. I'll quote two things. First one is your anti-CAA NRC protest in Seattle, and the second one is your anti-caste movement. Do you think which has triggered the government to give you visa because of the anti-CA, because of the laws they brought, or because of the anti-caste movement, or both combined?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably both combined. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't tell you which one, because I'll tell you one thing. The Modi administration and its proxies opposed both. Like, so when we brought forward the resolution condemning CA and RC, that time the Modi government's San Francisco consulate sent a public letter. They publicly opposed it, and their supporters in the Hindu American Foundation and the Coalition of Hindus of North America, I mean, there were hundreds of people who spoke against it, but there were more people who spoke for the resolution, and ultimately we won because we fought back, and that's why we won. And then when we brought forward the caste discrimination bill, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad opposed it publicly, and then again, of course, all the other Modi proxy organizations opposed it. So in reality, the Modi administration and their supporters, both in India and the US, have opposed both those bills. So it's hard for me to say which one played a bigger role.
Yes, ma'am. You told many were in the favor of the bill, caste bill. Why do you think so? Like, do people face so much discrimination there? Because in India we have caste system, and in America there is a multicultural country. People from various races, religions live there. How come caste has become a huge issue in America?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, obviously, if you look at the way the caste system plays out in India, it has some gruesome consequences. There are literally people can be lynched. There's massive violence. There's also especially sexual violence against Dalit women. So obviously, caste violence is far more severe and horrific in India, and much more systematic, obviously, because it's in the Indian context, obviously. In the United States, as you said, it's not that oppressed caste people of Indian origin face caste discrimination from non-Indians. Of course not, because the caste system is not part of the non-Indian, society. However, the immigration of people from the Indian subcontinent is now big enough that a lot of people, especially in the tech sector, for example, it's very common for you to be in a team where your peers are from India also, and your boss is also from India. So in that context, it's quite widespread for workers from oppressed castes to experience discrimination on a very regular basis. I mean, there are statistical studies that have been done about this also uh, to confirm this. But in addition to that, there was a very poignant public letter that was published in the Washington Post a few years ago, that was written by a group of women Dalit software engineers in the US tech industry. And it was really moving and really eye opening, because they explained how they faced systematic caste based discrimination from their Indian peers and bosses. And they also experienced sexual stigma. They were subjected to sexual slurs just because they were Dalit women. And there are a lot of people who will tell you that they face that kind of experience. In fact, when we organized hundreds of people, in fact thousands of people, we had people coming from all over the country and also from Canada to support the bill. We had Dalit people from all over the US and from Canada who came here. And so many people, when they spoke in we have the city council by law has to.
Ma'am, only Dalit people or OBC as well?
A lot of people, people from all religions. In fact, we had so many Indian Muslims supporting it, Indian Christians, Indian Hindus, Hindus of dominant caste were supporting it. So we had, and we had American workers, non-Indian American workers, union members, unions supporting it. So I mean, that kind of solidarity is pretty crucial for winning anything substantial, because otherwise they can just break the movement. They can just divide you. It's very easy. That's why that solidarity is very important. And we explained to American workers that you should support this bill even though you're not Indian, because if you're fighting against racism, then you should fight against caste oppression also, because we have to fight against all oppressions. As they say in the labor movement, an injury to one is an injury to all. You are not going to end one type of oppression if you're not willing to fight against another type of oppression. The fight goes to, you have to have solidarity. And so on that basis, we were able to build tremendous unity among people. But during that time, in the public testimonials, we heard so many Dalit workers, in fact, many of them are tech workers, not all of them, but many of them are tech workers, who told us of actual incidents in their lives, here in the US work life, where they experienced discrimination, they were insulted, humiliated, passive aggressive comments, slurs, supposed jokes that are humiliating, experiences when they go out to dinner with their co-workers, Indian co-workers, experiences when they go to the grocery store or to the temples or other places of worship. So it's pretty common. And that public testimonial from the Dalit workers themselves was one of the most powerful features of the movement we built.
Yes, ma'am. I'll ask two questions from the right wing side, like the questions posed at you. Why do you tarnish the image of India in foreign soil? Why do you do that? Why talk about casteism? Why talk about CA, NRC? If you are in India, you can talk about it. Why are you sitting in a foreign country and talking about India and tarnishing the image of India?
I think what tarnishes the image of India is the caste system itself, not talking about it. So if we want a good image for India, then we should all be fighting against the caste system. We cannot shove it under the rug. And most of the people who opposed our bill really are Hindutvawadi, who believe in the caste system, but then they say that, oh, the caste system doesn't exist. So my response to them was, if you don't believe in the caste system, then why are you opposed to this bill? If you don't believe in the caste system, then you should support a bill that is against the caste system, right? That's the only logical conclusion I can draw. If you're against the caste system, then you should not be against this bill. But the argument that they make is dishonest. In reality, they don't have the nerve to come out and say the reality, which is that they do want the caste system. They want the right to look down on other human beings based on this abstract notion of caste. Well, we don't agree with that. So if anybody wants a good image for India, then fight for good things. It's not talking about the caste system that is a problem. It is the existence of the caste system that's a problem.
Why talk about Narendra Modi or BJP government or their policies, their laws in foreign soil? Why do you do that? Don't do that. This is the comment they are putting at you.
Well, I think that we have to fight against injustice everywhere and anywhere. As Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so, in reality, what we need, as I was saying before, is international movements. Meaning, for example, right now, we need working people on every continent opposing the genocide of the Palestinians. It doesn't matter whether you're Palestinian or not. And in fact, think about it, right? uh, if we all engaged in gatekeeping and said only Palestinians should speak out against their genocide, nobody who is not Palestinian should speak out, will the Palestinians ever get any support? Absolutely not. It's a recipe for isolation and more injustice, more and more horrors and bloodshed. The only alternative to this type of dystopian future where there is bloodshed of ordinary people is for us to build international solidarity across national boundaries, across racial divisions, racial and ethnic divisions, but not with the billionaire class. The solidarity has to be with working people across continents. So it's a very, very important idea. And without that solidarity, we will never be able to achieve any progress in our world.
Right wing in India is welcoming the decision of consulate and for putting you in the rejection list, your visa in the rejection list, and they are telling like visa is not a right, it is a privilege. You are denied the privilege. This is the statement they are making. What is your reply to that?
I think it is pretty stunning for anybody to say that, because let's keep in mind, we are talking about an 82-year-old woman who is facing multiple illnesses, who has become dramatically frail. I'm talking about my mother. My mother is 82 years old. She has multiple illnesses. She is very weak. She has served her community for over 50 years. She was a teacher in a Kannada school and she retired as a principal. She has taught generations of students, thousands and thousands of students. She has served her community endlessly. And is this the reward? These people who are attacking me, is that what they want to do to this woman? This woman is a citizen of India. She has served her community. She wants to see her daughter because she is very weak and she is old. So really, I think the people who are saying these, attacking me, I mean, they are attacking themselves in the sense that they are exposing themselves. They're exposing their own horrific minds. They're exposing their own lack of humanity, and they will live to regret it.
Yes, ma'am. So, my final question: how's your mother, and what is your next move? What are you planning to do?
My mother is in, as I said, in very, very frail health. She's extremely anxious. She is desperate to see me and my husband. We are a very close family, and she is extremely anxious and desperate to see us. And we will keep building this movement. And like I said before, I am not the only one. Alongside myself, I am also fighting for people like Ashok Swen, Nitisha Kaul, and the hundreds of others who have been denied visas and who have had their OCI revoked. And it is not just about the OCI and visa, it is about fighting against Modi, it's about fighting against Trump, and it's about fighting against all the parties that support capitalism. So ultimately, everything that I'm doing, it's not just about my own rights, it's about the larger fight for working people to win a better world.
If you were not involved in the politics, would have got the visa and you'd have had the access to meet your mother now. Do you regret for speaking out, or do you regret for being an activist now? Like you're not able to see your mother now. Do you regret any of those?
Like any human being, I have lots of regrets in my life. Anybody who says they don't have regrets is not being honest, because part of being a human being is, and growing older, is to realize the things that you could have done better in your life. So I am being honest. I have lots of regrets in my life, but that is not a regret I have. I do not regret for one moment for having fought for working people. In fact, I am deeply proud and honored that I was able to help lead these movements where we have won historic victories that have no parallel. I'm not saying that part with pride. It is a tragic situation for the working class that there is no other organization that has been able to do what we have done through worker strike back and our socialist movement, where we have won historic victories in Seattle, which is an example of not just what we won but how we won, the fighting strategy that's needed. Why did we win the ban on caste discrimination here, and why did the leaders who led the bill in California, why did they lose? There are some really important lessons there about why working people need a fighting strategy. And not only do I not regret it, I am extremely proud of the work we have done, and I hope that it is continued nationally and internationally.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for your time, and whatever you said was so inspiring, and it will inspire a lot of people. And hope you get the visa soon and you visit your mother. And if you get time, come to our office. Let's meet for a coffee or anything. Thanks so much for your time, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. And yes, if I do get a chance to visit India, I would love to meet in person.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks.
Take care.